Welcome to the Jess Larsen Show on innovation and leadership. This is kind of a special episode. We get to have one of my favorite authors on the show, Chris Voss, author of Never Split the Difference, founder of the Black Swan Group, former lead hostage negotiator for the FBI globally. Chris, I'm really excited you had time to do this, and I'm excited about your film documentary. I don't know what you call it, but it was really fun to watch it there at Sundance.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, it's my pleasure, Jess, and thanks for having me on. And, the documentary will probably be out first part of next year, but yeah, it was kind of fun. That Sundance event was great. Randy Garn is a great guy.
I have recommended your book to so many CEOs. I've listened to it many times on Audible. My listeners, I'm sure, are sick of listening to this, but if you don't count like 300 or 400 books in the Jason Bourne genre, and you take just business psychology, investing books, I've listened to maybe 900 or so in the last dozen years. So I'm getting my podcast episodes and my books trying to match up here, and yours is in the absolute way up at the top, like over and over. It's so practical. I get asked all the time from business authors, like people who want to write a book or people thinking to write a book, and I send them your book all the time. Like, listen, this is the most entertaining business book that has ever been written. And then the practical tips are so incredibly useful. Like, this is like the gold standard of business books because people are absolutely gripped by it. And then they learn these incredibly powerful tools. So, I mean, I know you know that it sold like crazy, but you got a fan here. So,
no, thank you very much. And I got to tell you, my co-author, actually there are two co-authors. My son Brandon is uncredited co-author. He worked really hard on the book. But Tal Raz is a writer. Tal Raz writes good, great, entertaining business books, and that's really he made it entertaining the way he put it together on paper.
Yeah, in fact, I'd love to have him on the show. I'm a fan of other books that he's helped with. I think Keith Ferrazzi's and stuff like that. But well, listen, I again, such a fan of your work. Let's start with this. What is the Black Swan Group? Who are your ideal customers?
Yeah, well, the Black Swan Group consults, trains, coaches, negotiations of all types. I mean, the only thing we don't get in the middle of divorces. If an attorney is involved, it's the attorney's job to really be guiding their clients, and divorces are just tend to be so emotional and so messy that you just got to leave that in the hands of attorneys. But any other kind of negotiation, like we have coached people. Literally, you name it. A negotiation with an insurance company and a negotiation, a merger and acquisition across the board. We coach and train. I originally thought the Black Swan Group would just instruct, teach, train. And people are like, look, you got to coach me too. And we coach a lot of people. So it's human interactions. It's a tactical application of emotional intelligence for long-term trusted relationships. And, we coach globally. I mean, I think I answered some of your question.
Sure. And I guess we should give people like a little more reference for the few people living under a rock who aren't as impressed with you as I am. Can you give people a little bit of a scope of what life is like when you're the global head FBI hostage negotiator dealing with, from bank robberies to terrorist situations?
Yeah, well, it was a privilege to do it, so which means I don't think it ground me down. People ask me about the pressure of, working kidnappings internationally. I mean, literally all over the world, all over the developing world. Kidnapping is not a problem in what we used to call the first world. You don't get to go to Paris and work a kidnapping. You're working one in Manila or you're working one in Nigeria or someplace like that. But it was a privilege. It was a privilege to be there to help people. I've always liked helping people. Simultaneously, besides helping the kidnapped victim and their families, it's bad guys on the other side. It's a way they're making money. And it's a way for me, the kidnap negotiations were a way to identify the bad guys, gather information, find ways to put them out of business. That's the difference, I guess, in the negotiations now. As a kidnap negotiator, my job was to put the other side out of business. As a business negotiator, my job is really to keep people in business and to have long-term lasting relationships. And the crazy thing about it is you want to put the bad guys out of business. Wake up their humanity. Get them to change businesses where they're contributing to the world. And, believe it or not, they're going to be on a journey themselves, and eventually many of them decide that terrorism, there's something better to make the world a better place other than violence. That's really what we're trying to get them to see.
I know you're such a big fan of Jim Camp and his book, Start With No, so I went and bought it. But I've heard you reference when he talks about this idea of negotiation as human performance, almost like it's a sport. And you've talked about this idea of, practicing in like a low stakes situation, say for high stakes performance later. And I'm misquoting you there, so feel free to correct me. But can you dive a little deeper into this thought process and into this concept for how to achieve mastery?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question too. I mean, emotional intelligence on one end of the spectrum, and this is the application of emotional intelligence. Our emotional intelligence is pretty much, we have an unlimited capacity for it. Separate from, EQ, separate from IQ. Your IQ is kind of fixed. Like no matter how many times you play chess or, study math problems, your IQ is going to pretty much stay the same. Now, your emotional intelligence, it might be limitless, but it's perishable. It's like a language, a way of thinking. And if you don't keep speaking a language, like my native tongue, my first language is English. You drop me in Spain and for 10 years and have me speaking nothing but Spanish, my English is going to diminish my ability to pick it up. And so whatever analogy works for you. Camp happened to be a football coach and very involved in athletics. And he said negotiation is a human performance event. You got to practice. You got to work at it. You got to prepare. Tiger Woods, not only did he spend a lot of time on the practice tees and on the putting greens, but he had coaches. Like Tiger Woods had a swing coach his entire career. He's probably got one now, even as he struggles to stay on the tour. But at the height of his game, he didn't rely strictly on playing in tournaments to be good. How does this come home on emotional intelligence? The best example for me was one of the times I crashed and burned. The suicide hotline that I was told to go learn this skill on had great training. So you finish the training. They do a good job of training, and you get done with the training, and you're sharp. You're good. You're very good at it because the training is good, and you put in the work. A year later, my skills had eroded significantly. I had no idea. I come up from my annual review at the hotline. All sorts of bad habits had creeped in because I thought just, being on the hotline was enough instead of paying attention to how I was on the hotline. And, I took this call, and Jim, great guy, is listening in the other room. Caller gets done. He says, man, caller says to me, you did a great job. Wow, that was great. You are so good. Thank you so much. Thanking me profusely. And I get out and I go into the other room, and I'm kind of like, I'm looking forward to hearing the evaluation. I was so good. The caller congratulated me. And I sit down with Jim, and he said it much more nicely than this, but he said, that stunk. You were horrible. And I'm like, what do you mean? Didn't you hear the caller? He congratulated me for being great. He said, yeah, let's start with that. That means that he thinks you came up with the answers. He doesn't own any of them. None of them will last. And the fact that he congratulated you tells you did it wrong. And I remember thinking, like, how did I get to this skill erosion when I've been on the hotline, 2 shifts a month for 12 months? Because I was just playing in the game. I wasn't practicing. I wasn't focusing on my skills. And so now, in little ways, like the opportunities for low stakes practice are everywhere. And then you get the opportunity. I got some personal information out of my Lyft driver the other day that I was shocked that I heard. Deeply held, close, personal, very personal information. I got on another trip recently, I lost my suitcase at the airport. And I had a baggage, the lady in the lost suitcase section office, who I have never seen them help anybody by leaving the office and going and looking for the bag. she left the office and went and found my bag for me. So it was a little small stakes interaction, but the opportunities are everywhere.
That's such a good example. And I really love you bringing this idea that the bad habits creep in. Like that's this degradation, that's where it comes from. It's really helpful for me to think about it that way. At our company, Mylan, we teach basically like CEO coaching skills. We teach them to managers for their staff. Like, hey, take your boss hat off for an hour a week or an hour a month and just actually care about your staff member. Have a one-on-one about their problems, not about your problems. And like, the hardest thing to do is get them to like talk for 30% or less of the conversation instead of just give out answers, right? But so what we do is for 8 weeks in a row, we make them practice on each other. Like there's a bunch of managers in the room. We're trying to create the low stakes of have them practice with each other. And when you think about a scenario like that, where do you think I'm likely to have a challenge helping them translate that to the real world? Because there, it's like mutually assured destruction. This one coaches this way for 45 minutes. This one coaches this way for 45 minutes. Pretty safe environment, right? But now they've actually got to transition from there to their staff where they're worried about looking dumb or angry customer. They're, like that transition from the safe environment to the real world. Where do you think we may need to up our game to help them make that transition?
Yeah, I think, and if I heard all the question, because it was a great question with a lot into it. I mean, some of the challenge is how is the time best managed? And if a boss talks all the time, it's because they're trying to get people to a location as quickly as possible, save as much time, save anxiety, grief, angst. Look, just let me give them the answers. Because time is money, in point of fact. It's one resource that we can't replace. We have a finite amount of. At some point in time, everybody recognizes that. There are other things that are money too. I got a friend that says relationships. Yes. That doesn't devalue the fact that in the final moments of every human being's life on earth, every dying wish has to do with more time. So to me, that's an indicator that, time is money. So how do you get bosses and managers? I had a judge in a trial who used to like to say, we're going to delay things in order to save time. And I would be like, because, we had a jury trial. Judge's name was Michael McCasey, phenomenal federal judge. And we got the jury. We're asking the jury to give us their lives for 9 months. And of course, his job to manage the jury was to keep them focused. And if he's got to dismiss them early, they're going to be like, oh, God, we're trying to get out of here. We're trying to get this trial done, and we're leaving early for the day? Why can't you guys get your act together? Every single time before he would dismiss the jury early, he said, all right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to delay things in order to save time. And he'd be like, oh, okay. And they would happily accept the delays. So a boss, a supervisor who's a mentor, is listening to people so it sinks in and they only got to talk it through with them once. And it takes longer to tell them the same thing 10 times than it does to take your time the first time and hear them out and have it be a collaborative conversation and actually hear their concerns and repeat their concerns back to them before you give them the answers. And it feels like a very inefficient process. It feels like this tremendous delay, but it ends up saving a lot of time. Those are my initial thoughts on what I think you shared.
Okay, great. At Child Rescue Association, our charity that combats child trafficking, our lead instructor for our program.
I'm going to interrupt this. I think that's awesome. I am so impressed that you got that kind of a mission and you're actually making a difference in the world in a way that the ripple effects are astronomical. So thank you very much for even allowing me to have a conversation with you when you support that kind of.
Well, I appreciate it. Unfortunately, my mother-in-law was a victim of sex trafficking as a 12-year-old in Santa Monica, California. She was the 4th generation in their family, and she broke the cycle, so it didn't happen to my wife. So it's a really close to home issue for our family, and we're just happy for anybody who wants to help kids, you know. So, well, I'll start with this. So our lead instructor for a program we're working on right now with law enforcement, he's former bureau, 22 years, counter intel, and a kind of a hero of mine, kind of probably the most influential person I've ever met in my life, like ability to influence others. And he's a big fan of yours. He told me one day about being out with you, and at the end of your shift, you said "safe home," and you said, "Oh, that's a New York thing." For people who don't know that phrase, can you explain kind of where it comes from and why it's so important to you guys?
Yeah, it's a New York phrase. I spent 14 years in working on the Joint Terrorist Task Force in New York City. My partners there were NYPD detectives the whole time, and these guys had big hearts. I mean, big hearts. I never saw a bad cop. I mean, even the guys that didn't work that hard, they had big hearts, and that was one of their phrases, and they would always say when we got done at the end of the day, get home safe home. And it's kind of if you've made it through the journey of a whatever perilous journey, ideally you're out there doing good, you're one of the good guys, you're fighting evil. And at the end of the day, we want everybody to get home safe. So safe home is a New York phrase. It means a lot, resonates.
And to me, I'm going to put words in your mouth, so feel free to correct me. To me, when I hear you guys say stuff like that, it's almost like a little bit of like the sense of brotherhood of like, I care about you more than just the job. Like it almost feels like there's a little more to it there too. Is that fair? Or how would you say it better?
I think that's completely fair. There's a definite bonding in the brotherhood there. Yeah, it means a lot.
So we're working on a program right now. We're raising money for scholarships so that cops who are working like, counter gang, counter organized crime, counter drug trafficking networks that are also trafficking children. We're raising scholarships so they can learn more like source recruitment strategies instead of just like, how do you turn an informant? Like, how do you recruit a source in place that could stay there for 5 years and feed like, tip after tip after tip kind of a thing. And so thinking about this program, we've got it. There's an intro class and then there's 6 months of coaching, and we've got guys from the agency, former undercover law enforcement. We got a bunch of different instructors over those 6 months to help them practice this skill set before they actually go, try it on somebody who's part of one of these criminal networks that's selling drugs and selling kids kind of thing. And so I'll ask kind of a similar question to my last one. I'm thinking about this process, and our guys, they're going to do so much role playing, and they're going to have exercises at the mall in lower stakes situations, right? But when it comes to this idea of like, okay, now it's time to go to the real world, what kind of advice would you have for them for just mindset or just anything of like, oh, now it's time, practice is over, now it's game time?
Yeah, I mean, the ability to connect with somebody and, to connect with someone on the other side and turn them into a long-term source, stop them from being a long-term force for evil and a long-term force for good. I mean, that's magic. I mean, and the guys that I worked with in the FBI that were great at it. I mean, they were really low-key, and they did stuff that we all admired. Like, I always wanted to be one of those guys that recruited a source, and everybody would say, I got no idea why that guy cooperated. Like, there was an agent in New York, his name was Larry Wack. Larry Wack was this low-key guy. There was nothing showy about him. He wasn't loud. He didn't make a lot of noise. And everybody admired Larry. I mean, everybody. My desk was close to his. I got advice from him all the time. And all of us wanted to emulate Larry. I mean, there's something really incredible, magical about how much your colleagues hold you in esteem because of the cases you made, the people that you recruited, the sources that you recruited, that nobody else could figure out how to happen. And, there's a tremendous amount of self-accomplishment in that. It's a privilege to do that. And the self-satisfaction for you is phenomenal. Like, it's not loud. It's not showy. It's not Real Housewife stuff. It's just astonishingly satisfied to do that. And then that's the mindset. I mean, I always wanted to make cases that people were like, wow. Like, I got no idea that guy Voss did that, but that was a phenomenal case.
Yeah. When you think about folks working on that skill set, like when you went from, the suicide hotline was the real deal. Suicide hotline, when you go from training to actually talking to someone, or, hostage negotiating, you go from training to actually working your first bank robbery, your first terrorist hostage situation. Any thoughts of like, oh, here's my rookie game, just mindset and how to go into that?
Yeah, I was very satisfied that I had the process down. And I got thrown into sort of the big leagues early as a hostage negotiator because we had a bank robbery with hostages, and those are unicorn events. Like, they happen on TV all the time. And but in reality, the bad guys almost always get away before the cops show up, so they don't get trapped inside. If they know the cops are coming, they ain't hanging around to find out what's going to happen. They're going to get out of there. And I was very satisfied on the process. I'd spent the time on a suicide hotline. I'd had that annual review where I'd been horrible. I've been working on my game a lot, and so they hand me the phone. I just leaned into the process. I've been practicing, and really, it's get your process and trust your process, and realize that whatever process you have, whatever system, that it's not perfect. And I learned that the hard way, because a really good process is going to get you through the day 9 times out of 10. 9 times out of 10. And if you do it more than 10 times, you're going to have a day that ain't going to get you through, just based on the numbers. And that eventually happened to me. And then I remember my former boss, Gary Nessler, used to preach best chance of success. Well, best chance is not guaranteed. And so understand that, there's going to come a time, no matter how good you are, when you're going to get crushed. And that's actually the biggest opportunity for growth that you will ever come across.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Thinking about this situation where we're taking, we're taking law enforcement officers that maybe haven't done a lot of undercover work, or they haven't done source recruitment before. And, there can be a lot of talk, there can be a lot of talk about bad guys and some less than nice labels for them, right? And now they've got to work with someone who is still part of the gang. They're still part of the whatever drug cartel, organized crime group. But this is someone who they're like, man, I don't think it's good that my cousin sells drugs, but it keeps me up at night that he's selling kids. I wish I could do something about that. And this officer's saying, like, what if I could help you with that, right? And they need to actually care about their source. Can you talk about the idea of empathy versus tactical empathy, of working with somebody who maybe you wouldn't want your kids to grow up to be like?
Yeah, and let's separate empathy out from sympathy. And let's even separate it out from compassion. So, a friend of mine, Stephen Kotler, I love Stephen Kotler's work. His books are phenomenal. His information on flow is incredible. Kotler says, empathy is about the transmission of information. Compassion is the reaction to that transmission. So empathy is really just a demonstration of understanding, not an understanding, but a demonstration of understanding. So you can understand, but if you haven't articulated what you understand, there's no empathy, because the other side's got no idea that you got it right. And actually, you're not sure that you got it right either. That's not the same as having sympathy for somebody. And, there's a lot of discussion and parsing of this word. Some people say there's emotional empathy. Some people say there's cognitive empathy. They're trying to parse this word in so many different ways, because it has become, in common usage, synonymous with sympathy or compassion. But that's not the origin of the word. The origin of the word is really about understanding the emotions being conveyed by the other side. You look up the word etymology. Go back to its origin. It's not sympathy. Now, if you can separate it out that way, then you don't have to have sympathy for a bad guy. you can care about them as a human being. You can have compassion for them. And that's why I'm making the distinction also. I mean, I don't imagine I ever ran across anybody, no matter how bad they were. I never worked directly with serial killers, with people that had killed multiple people because it was their entertainment. And I never worked with pedophiles. I would have difficulty having compassion for them. I suppose I could find it because most pedophiles got that way because they themselves were victims of pedophiles. It's sort of a recurring cycle. But I talked to some really bad guys, and I would not want to have bad things happen to them. I would wish that they would find a way to find their humanity. I would wish that they would find a way to reclaim themselves as human beings. And it would be my effort through the good works that I was trying to get them to engage in, that they would reclaim their humanity. We worked a terrorism case with one really bad guy on the other side that I was in direct communication with in an undercover capacity. And one of my colleagues said, I think you actually like this guy. And I remember thinking, yeah, and if I needed to pull a trigger on him, I would still pull a trigger. So these are some difficult things that we're asking people in law enforcement or law enforcement related activities to be able to make those emotional distinctions. These are tough distinctions. And it's one of the reasons why we often take for granted the emotional peril that we put law enforcement officers in.
Yeah. When you think about preparing officers for that type of situation, what advice would you have, for the low stakes practice to work up to that, being in that scenario?
I think, to be forewarned is to be forearmed. I mean, I think as people, if you understand going in, if you're not caught off guard, and you practice, and then you work on emotional intelligence and you do what you can to have net greater good. But I really think, every time I kind of got bulldozed or, crushed, if you will, I realized that I'd been warned it was coming. And human beings are remarkably resilient given warning. People who get caught off guard, they got reason to be angry because they weren't warned in advance. So I really believe in the resilience of the human spirit, given warning. So I think people should just know going in. Look, this is a train's gonna hit you. Get ready.
Yeah. No, that's so helpful. So thinking about the potential negotiation situation there, right? Law enforcement officer, they do at least 6 months of training. They've worked with the analysts, figure out who to approach, and they've befriended them and these kind of things. And it's getting to the situation of they have so much trust that this person is thinking about doing something that might get them killed by the gang, informing, right? For possibly multiple years. And they have this humanity in them that actually wants to do the right thing. And then they have this fear, and they have their other relationships of, so they have fear for, themselves or their family. They have relationships of they realize they might be sending some of their friends to jail, but to do the right thing. And they've got all this conflict, and this officer now needs to help negotiate with them to ultimately do what's right for these children instead of, their buddies. Any thoughts that you would have to advise an officer going into that type of a negotiation? Is this person going to commit to help police or not?
The thoughts in order to recruit them, or the thoughts in order to maintain your own humanity?
The thoughts to recruit, where you're negotiating with this person they're really considering becoming this long-term source. And they're really considering not becoming the source because of their fear and because they do have relationships with their friends in the gang. And they're, it's almost like helping them negotiate with themselves. Are they going to stick with the gang, or are they going to help law enforcement?
Yeah, well, what I would say, and here's what would work for me, which doesn't work for everybody. Don't make promises you can't keep. I don't make a lot of promises, and I'm usually pretty clear about what I'm not promising the other side. Misleading someone then you got a moral and ethical dilemma between the two of you, between what happens to them and with yourself simultaneously. Now, I'm going to try to get you out of this. You know, if you can't promise somebody, let them make a free and fully informed, knowing decision. You know, don't deceive by omission. Don't deception by the literal truth, or, well, I never said, you know, I promised to tell you the truth, but I never promised to tell you the whole truth. There's a lot of nonsense out there like that. There are going to be points in time where, and especially the bad guys on the other side, they're asking you questions that are really hard to answer to see if you'll lie. Not because they don't know the answer, not because they don't know the reality of the situation. You know, they want to trust you because you're going to be honest, period. You're going to be a straight shooter. You're not going to hide stuff from them. Then let them make a knowing decision. Like the people on the other side, you know, if you're in law enforcement, you're recruiting people, I got news for you. They're better liars than you are. And they will try to see if you will lie. And you're never going to be able to outlie any of these people. They're better at it than you. Or they're going to find out in really short order that you lied. What they want to find out is, will you tell them the truth? Are there risks here? Be honest with them. You know, be brutally honest. If you're asking them to put themselves in a peril that might get them killed, don't kid around about it. You know, if they get killed, and the moment they're crossing to the other side, wherever that is, are they going to want to make that cross feeling betrayed because you misled them? Or are they going to want to make that cross to wherever that is, knowing that this is what they accepted? And in a kidnapping once, I'm working on kidnapping. I'm trying to get the collaboration of the wife. It was Paul Johnson case in Saudi Arabia. I was just darn near completely sure that Al Qaeda was going to kill Johnson on deadline. And prior to that, we're negotiating with the woman who's his wife, probably getting ready to be his widow, to go into the media to make some statements. And his boss was there, phenomenal guy, looking out for her and Paul as best he could. God bless this guy, because he was, without question, doing everything he could to protect Paul's wife. And he looks me in the eye and he says, if she does this, is this going to save Paul's life? It's going to save her husband's life. And I thought about whether or not I was going to blow smoke at him, best chance of success, any of that nonsense. And I said, this might not be within reach. And he looked at me and he said, I didn't think so. I just wanted to see if you were going to tell me the truth. And she fully cooperated. And it made a big difference in every case after that. And her husband was murdered on deadline.
Wow. What a tough situation.
You got to be honest.
Yeah. You know, it leads me to another question. Thinking about these officers going into that exact conversation where there are no guarantees of the future, right? Thinking about tone. You know, I've heard you and I know you've got other great trainers at Black Swan Group talk about the idea of often or sometimes tone can be even more important than the actual words said. Can you talk about that or put more meat on those bones?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Like it is so overlooked. And then as soon as people realize what kind of a superpower tone is, it's insane. Like it's insane. I can say, wow, you know, that was a good question. Or I could say, wow, that was a good question. My tone made a 180-degree turn. You know, one was a compliment, the other was an insult. You know, and especially assertives. You know, I'm a natural born assertive, so our tone is the worst. Like, if I don't watch myself, every word that comes out of my mouth makes you feel like I think you're an idiot, no matter how good my word choice is. So tone is absolutely a superpower. I mean, I'm communicating meaning to you before I finish the first word, let alone the first sentence. So tone is a secretive, magical superpower. And I study everybody. everybody. And I think it was Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street. I think if anything, that guy understands tone. Because I'm like, look at how much impact he had, and you can calibrate that impact however you want. But I'm like, this dude's got something I got to learn from. And I think he was a master of tone. So tone is incredible. It's upward inflection, downward inflection, inquiring, damning. It's just, it's incredible. Tone is incredible.
You've talked a lot when it comes to tone about, starting with a smile, slowing it down. They seem so basic. Can you talk about why they're so powerful?
Because the neurochemical reactions in somebody's brain is really the overriding influence on them making up their mind what they're going to do. One of our top level coaching clients, this guy spends a lot of money with us because he's Tiger Woods in his own way. And he's horrified that he's going to lose a tournament, and he spent as much time as possible getting coached because he's got that much at stake. And the other day we're talking, he says, I realize the prefrontal cortex is a figment of everybody's imagination. Everybody's driven by their reptilian brain, the alligator brain, and then the drugstore in their brain affects how the alligator is going to react. And I look to release the drugstore in their brain. So, with tone and the impact on the other side, and then like in the right word choice, but with tone, playful tone. My last two personal negotiations that I was astonished at the outcome was because I happen to be in a playful tone, playful mind, playful mindset, and playful approach. I had a medical bill for $3,300, and I'm getting ready to pay the whole thing. And just before I pay, I'm like, let me see if I can call and get a discount out of these guys. It's probably 10% throwaway discount. And the woman in collections answers the phone, and I go, I owe you guys money. Just, like it was fun. And I ended up getting 80% of the bill forgiven because she liked my tone. Like, I was shocked. It was a $3,300 bill, and we're going back and forth, and I said, I got to pay this before you guys come and drag me out of my house. And she starts laughing, and she says, yeah, we will do that too. But we're joking back and forth, and I said, I pay this whole thing right now. How much of a discount can you give? And she says, hold on a second. Then I heard her talking to somebody in the background. I hear her go, $700. And she comes back and she says, $700. And I go, and like, I'm looking for 10%. So I think this is a little over 20%. I go, you guys are taking $700 off? She goes, no, we'll settle the whole thing for $700. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Because I'm laughing and joking with her. I put her in a playful mind. Everybody else that she talks to is whining, complaining, barking, begging for mercy, coming up with excuses. I'm laughing with her about what they're going to do with me. The suitcase that I retrieved from baggage the other day, I walk in, and you walk into these places, these poor people in the office where you go to for your lost luggage, like they're getting hammered every day over stuff they did not do. Like, you are as mad. Most people that walk into that office are as mad as angry hornets. And as I'm walking in, I'm thinking to myself, what are they thinking of themselves when they see somebody like me walking toward the door? What they're thinking is, this idiot thinks I have a magic wand. Because that's what people walking in looking for lost luggage think. You're going to wave a magic wand and poof, my suitcase is going to be there. So I walk through the door, girls, how can I help you? Well, first of all, you already know how you could help me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be walking in your office. But instead of me reacting negatively, I go, I'm looking for you to wave a magic wand. And that woman ends up leaving the office and going and finding my suitcase. And I have never seen it. But it was all based on my tone of voice.
Okay. I love that this is where you're going with it. I got to go to Nigeria. U.S. Special Operations Command took me over, and we trained when Nigeria was having the problem with Boko Haram. We went out a week. It was like, I brought a 25-year SEAL with me, and it was SF guy and a Force Recon Marine. It was like a week of like, hey, here's all the mistakes we made in Iraq and Afghanistan. hopefully you don't have to make those same mistakes with Boko Haram, and hopefully America doesn't have to come help, right? That's what this week is. And me and this 25-year SEAL were briefing the new head of Special Operations Command for Nigeria. And after the meeting, the SEAL like really hammered into me. He taught me this lesson about like, he's like, why did we say what we said and why did he say what he said? And he's like, Jess, this is very simple. Everything needs to be with it. What's in it for them? He's like, that's what we're going to do for 10 days while we're here. That's what this is all about. And like, to me, you take that to like a whole nother level. Like, I'm listening to everything you just said in that story, and it reminds me of like all the things you teach about labeling. Like when you show up and you empathize because you've labeled what's going on in their brain and articulated it and brought this like magnetic mood. It seems like you've done so many of the combination of your principles all in a like, I don't know how many words that is. Hey, I'm hoping for you to wave a magic wand. But it does seem like you've done like the skill stacking there. How would you say that better? What am I missing there?
Yeah, no, you're hitting it exactly. And it comes from practice, you know, and at some point in time, like you hit that moment. And yeah, I was trying to describe, because we're working on a television show, potentially, non-scripted show. And when the company that we're doing in development with, I said, look, this ain't going to be Real Housewives. They ain't going to be screaming. You know, it's not going to be exciting. It is going to be astonishing. And so how do we set it up in a way where people are not looking for people screaming at each other? And you get to if you can get to the moment where you've been practicing the labels and you've been practicing the tone of voice. And there are going to be moments when all of that stuff is going to come together and you are going to be astonished at what happens. And it really just comes through practice and, you know, having fun with it and pulling it together. And then everything sort of does come together. You're in flow for a moment and you hit it, and it's actually a lot of fun.
I want to, you use the word fun multiple times there. I want to dive into this because as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about like, you know, you think about this goal of like how much people want to be understood. You teach that all the time. And this idea of like, as you're preparing, this idea of like, can you uncover what their actual needs are, and instead of like assuming their needs, if I remember correctly. And like, to me, it almost seems like that situation, like you took a deep breath and you prepared and thought like, what's going on in this woman's life behind the desk in the room where everybody comes in and says, where's my baggage? Like you've prepped, you've shown up ahead of time, and like in a way, and I'm going to put words in your mouth, so I want you to correct me. It almost feels like you're like doing a test, like with your funny joke of, I want you to wave the magic wand. It's almost like you're testing. Am I uncovering that need that she needs to feel understood, that she doesn't have a magic wand and everybody is asking for the impossible? And it's like with a joke, you're like teasing out and seeing if you were right, that's her currently covered need. Or what? Am I wrong there?
Yeah, no, you're 1,000% dead on, because the application of these skills really is a little bit of a diagnostic. You know, it's a reasoning. You got a hypothesis. You got to test the hypothesis. You're going to throw it at somebody in a way that ideally will land, and then you're going to gauge their reaction and see where you are from there. So it is a constant analytical testing process. It's one of the reasons that we've really been helping people understand why you need your people in your organization to use these skills. It'll actually make them smart. Besides, it causes the user, it makes you think, analyze, assess. Get some data, think, analyze, and assess. Data improves design. I'm going to throw an emotionally intelligent guess at your state of mind at you in a way that I hope lands. I want to see reaction. I want to get some feedback, and I want to continue to move forward from there. And so it's very analysis oriented. It's very thinking, hypothesize, introspection oriented. It's one of the reasons why, in point of fact, the people that have the hardest time getting good at this are the extroverts. Because that's extroverts by definition. If you're really an extrovert, introspection is hard. You don't naturally do a lot of introspection. You don't think about energy. I mean, you just feel it and you feed it and you go on it. It's not that an extrovert can't be good at it, but of the things that will actually handicap you. Most of the people that appear extrovert are actually very introverted. They just learn the skills. You know, they're gregarious, they're buoyant, they're out there, they're funny, they laugh because they learned that it made them smarter and better. True extroverts are kind of rare. They can get good at this stuff, but one of their handicaps is they don't analyze that much naturally, so they have to learn how to analyze.
You know, I'm just thinking like back to the manager situation of like, you know, it's like a national sport in America to hate Mondays and hate your boss, you know? And like this idea of like, can I actually care about my staff so much that they actually think I've got their back and they're not just like a stepping stool for my success, right? And like, I that word calibration is really helpful to me as I think about this of like trying to help leaders test, but calibrate. Like, not only do I get my staff member, like not only do I get them, but do they also, like, are they coming to the conclusion that I get them? I think it kind of goes back to your right versus that's right kind of stuff.
Yeah. No, I think you're dead on. I think that's exactly the challenge. How do you let people know that you actually care about it? That's hard.
Yeah. Well, listen, I know I've only got 4 or 5 more hours of questions, so I hope you didn't have anything to do today. I know we're winding up for time. If people want to get classes or coaching or anything from Black Swan Group, or they want to connect with you or buy the books, where are the best places online?
Yeah, to buy the book, Amazon. Never split the difference. You're going to get the best price on Amazon, period. You know, there's no way around it. I wish I owned stock in Amazon. Maybe someday I'll be smart enough to buy it. But then for all of our resources and wherever you are in your negotiation journey, you know, we got stuff for you wherever you are. And a lot of the stuff is free. So the best way to the gateway to everything we have is through our newsletter, The Edge. And if you go to our website, blackswanltd.com, BLACKSWANLTD.com, in the upper right-hand side is a tab for the newsletter. Sign up for it. Yeah, give us your email because we're going to send you value. The newsletter is concise and actionable, and it's complimentary. And its real value is not because it's free, but because it's concise and actionable. You'll get it on Tuesday morning because Mondays are admin days, whether you like it or not. Tuesday morning, 7:30 in the morning. It's a great way to get your brain rolling on a concise article on negotiation, actionable ideas that you can probably adapt to whatever you're doing that day, maybe that morning. And then also there are training announcements, product announcements. It's the gateway to everything we have. So subscribing to The Edge by coming in through the website. And then when you get the chance, you know, see what's in the newsletter that tweaks your interest. Or when you have time to look over the website, there's a lot there. But the simplest way to get started and the easiest and the most actionable is by subscribing to our newsletter.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe to finish off here for our last couple minutes, thinking about my line of questioning, what did I not ask that I should have?
No, I loved it. You know, in any given thing we talked about, there's a lot of stuff here we could talk. We sit around with a bourbon for 3-4 hours talk about this stuff. But no, there wasn't anything that I felt that you left out.
Well, again, really appreciate you making the time. Such a fan of the books and everything you do. And I think it's like a gift to the rest of us that you took the time to write it down, to do these interviews, to do all the YouTube, to do the speeches. It's a way for us to all benefit from your, decades of skill building.
Thanks, Jess. It was my pleasure. I really enjoy the conversation.
Thanks. Okay, bye everyone.